Hello everyone! Today I'm going to do a part 2 to my favorite album covers of all time. I love cover art. It's the best. It's the first thing you see when you see a new album. It's your first impression. So last video in part 1 I talked about 11 of my favorite album covers and I had 11 more to show in this video, but then I recently got a new album as well which I haven't shown on this channel yet, and so it's actually going to be 12 covers in this video today because I just had to include it. I'm really excited to show it, so look forward to that as well. So we're going to start at the beginning though. We're going to start with the first album. So the first album is an ambient album. It's my only ambient album. It's Brian Eno, Ambient 1 Music for Airports. This is an album that is music for airports, and therefore you have this album cover that is this map, this abstract looking map that Brian Eno created himself, and it's super earthy tone and colors to it with just some basic lines. It appears to be what you may look at when looking at the side down at the earth when you're on an airplane. I personally love flying. I love airports. I love planes. I'm that person. Brian Eno's music on this album is super chillaxed, it's super muted, very calm, and it just perfectly encompasses why I love flying and why I love airports, because it can be just so relaxing as long as you arrive like 3 hours early, which I always do. The next album cover I have is like going in the opposite direction. Nirvana's Nevermind. This is like one of the most intense album covers I own. It's a naked baby, but it's not sexualized or erotic, so it's allowed to be on an album cover and it's allowed to be on YouTube, I hope. Obviously, one of the most popular grunge albums of all time, and I feel like the album cover really lives up to the hype and the legacy that this album has created. It speaks for itself. It's amazing. Apparently, Kurt Cobain initially wanted to have an underwater birth be on the cover of this album, so I feel like we ended up with something that is quite tame here. And I feel like this probably wouldn't be everyone's cup of tea, but that's sort of why I like it. I like that it just sort of is what it is, puts itself out there, and it doesn't really care, this album cover. The next album cover, going back to something very mute, very tame. I love a lot of album covers that are mute and tame as long as I feel like the actual music itself really lends itself into that, and that would be Neil Young's Harvest. This album cover is probably the most tame album cover I have on this overall list of my favorite album covers of all time. I love the little moon. It always reminds me of a sun. I always think it's like a nice golden hour sun. I don't know exactly, I don't really care. I just love the feel of this album cover. This one is such a stupid one. That's sort of the point, right? That's why I like it. It's just so simple that it's great. I also just really love the typography on this album cover as well. I love all the lines. I love the etching and line work around each of the letters, if you can see that, the shading around it. And once again, I think it perfectly captures the mood of this album. This album is very relaxed. It's very retrospective, contemplative in my mind. That's at least the mood it puts me in, and I feel like this album cover is also that. Can't believe I can read so much into an album cover that is so basic, but that's how it is. The next album cover is one of the best album covers of all time. It's Led Zeppelin's 4, or Untitled. This album cover is amazing. The front cover was created by actually finding a wall in real life. This is like an actual wall they found, and they hung up this specific painting and then took a photo of it. That's how they created this album cover. The reason I love this album cover so much is because Led Zeppelin by this point had made such a big name for themselves, and they decided to just have this really basic album cover in the sense of that it doesn't have any text on it, no name, no nothing to signify that it's Led Zeppelin. They wanted to create an album cover that leaves it up to the music totally and doesn't take away from the music by saying, oh, it's Led Zeppelin. It's just an album with some good ass music on it. This album design could have like a whole video about it. I could go into it for like 20 minutes, but one thing I did also want to mention was the inside illustration. Oh my god, the record is falling out. The record is falling out. This beautiful illustration of the tarot card, the Hermit. I love tarot. I'm one of those people, like, do I believe in tarot? No, but I think it's fun, right? I also just love that because the Hermit, it's one of my favorite cards. I've done a bit of graphic design work myself back in the day, and using shading and pencil is my favorite thing to do, so this is just beautiful. beautiful. This is brilliant. The next album is following up from an album that I showed in my first video in part 1, and that is Mingus. Mingus by Charles Mingus. This is a jazz record I have, and it has some more Fujita work on the front of it. Fujita is one of my favorite graphic designers. He's done a bunch of like book covers as well as some amazing abstract art style stuff for some album covers that I talked about a bit more in part 1. Just love these covers so much, and I think he has great taste in jazz because those are like 2 of my favorite jazz albums, not even considering the beautiful cover art that is on the front of them. Next we have a stupid one. I have a lot of stupid ones. My favorites, okay? That's how it works. Is Tyler's Goblin. I feel like there'll be at least one other person out there that will agree because come on, I can't be the only one that just loves this album cover. It's Buffalo Bill, I think, on the front of this album cover. When Buffalo Bill was like 19, Tyler created this album around the same age, I think, so that is the main link between this random photo of Buffalo Bill he put on the front of this album cover and Tyler himself. Apart from that, it's probably just Tyler being dumb and just putting a random photo on the front of this album cover. The texture and like the grain of the photo, if you can tell, that's my favorite part about this whole entire album cover. And I love the text just right over the front of the guy's face. The best. The back I don't love as much. It's just a random photo of Tyler when he's younger, but I don't really like the gatefold either, I'm not gonna lie, but I just love this front cover. It's just so perfect and symmetrical. And the next album cover is Sufjan Stevens' Carrie and Lowell. Oh my god, this album alone is just amazing. I've talked about this album a few times now, but the main reason I love this album cover is sort of similar to Tyler. It's got this feel to it because of the texture and the grain that is over the photo itself. I don't know if you can tell. I guess there's this decay to this photo, like this aging to the photo that makes it look old. Lots of wrinkles and cracks in the photo. And this is actually a photo of his mother and stepdad, I believe, and their names are Carrie and Lowell. It's such a personal cover. This is probably his most personal album, and that's the reason I love this album to begin with, because it's just so tear-jerking and sad. And I think that this album cover is also ridiculously sad for some reason to me. It just appears sad. I don't know what it is. There's something about family, you know, for some people it can be a very personal subject, and so for him to like just put his family on the front of this album cover with the title being 2 of his family members, I just am already sucked into this album just from looking at it. There's 11 different versions of this album cover. It's split ends, true colors. It's ridiculous. I can't believe there's 11 versions of this album cover. I'm not kidding you. So I have this blue, red, and yellow one, but you can find, I'm not kidding you, 10 other versions of this album cover. So there's a yellow and blue one, which is the one I have, it seems like. There's a red and green one, there's a purple and yellow one, there's a blue and orange one. And there's a bunch of other makeovers they did as well for sales milestones. And there's also a really rare one. There's only about 100 of them, which is a black and white one, which you can then color in with textures. And this was released to the press. I love it when any artist or album just pulls a bit of a risk and does something a little different that maybe isn't exactly normal. And apparently there was a lot of resistance initially creating this album cover because I think that their management thought that people would get confused about this album, but you can't get confused about this album. The line work and geometry on this album is unmistakable. I'm so happy I have the yellow one, but see, that's the thing. I just love the fact that like there's different versions of this album cover out there, and you can try and collect them all, or you can try and get the one that you love the most, and I got the one that I love the most. The next album is the album that I have just recently gotten. I have not shown this album yet. I am so excited to own this. It's now one of my favorite albums of all time. I only discovered it in the last 6 months. I discovered it through my reactions channel, through my YouTube, and it is Rainbow Rising. Oh my god. Yes, I own this. This is a world first here. I now own this album. This is literally insanity, and I will probably go into more depth about this specific copy and open it up, show you guys what this album has in store for me in a record update video that I will be doing relatively soon once I get a few more records. But for now, yes, I own this album, and this is one of my favorite album covers of all time. Of course, it's got just this amazing fantasy feel to it. It just feels like it's straight out of a high fantasy novel, and I'm loving high fantasy. I recently read Lord of the Rings. I'll be posting a video actually about me reading Lord of the Rings for the first time, having never seen the movies as well. So my first experience with Lord of the Rings ever. That video will be coming out in another week. I've just been loving fantasy essentially, and so this is totally reminding me of this love that I have. This album cover was painted or drawn by Ken Kelly. He's done some other album covers for other artists as well, including Kiss. It's just straight out of Stargazer. If you have to have a visual of what Stargazer looks like, this is it. I think Blackmore told Ken Kelly exactly what he wanted. Blackmore just had a vision, and here it is. Thank you, Ken Kelly. Thank you, Blackmore. Thank you, Dio. Thank you, everyone that was ever involved in this album. Next album cover is one from my favorite band of all time. It is The Smiths. It's one of Morrissey's beautiful album covers that he creates. This is The Queen is Dead, and he usually will take a pop star or a film actor and put them on the front of their covers in this sort of like really dulled out color tone, and so he's done this beautiful olive green here with this popping pink title, and I just love the shadow and shading once again on this album cover. It makes it feel really intimate, like you're just looking at this guy that is really sad. It looks like he's listening to the Smiths. Apparently this film did not do very well for this guy, for Elaine here, so I think it's actually really interesting that this album cover represents an album that did so well, one of the most famous, popular, best albums of all time, and on the front cover you have this shot of this guy in one of the darkest moments of his career actually. That's quite funny to me, but overall the reason I love this album cover is because of the green. It is my favorite color, and I have this on a t-shirt, and I love this t-shirt so much. This is just a video of me gushing over colors. The next album cover is in rainbows. I'm sorry. So this is obviously created by Stanley Donwood. He has nearly done all the cover art for every Radiohead album out there, with of course this one being included. This is my favorite Radiohead album cover. So Donwood did like a lot of work with the actual band while they were writing this album. He would stay in the studio with them, soak in the music, and then create the album work based off of what he was soaking up. And I really love that approach that he takes with his album covers. He really tries to immerse himself in Radiohead's world. And what we got here was like this very like organic sort of feeling, something on like a nucleus sort of level. The album is called In Rainbows, and you have like this very beautiful rainbow colored album cover as well. So it really suits the title as well. Great album cover. And lastly, we have Parquet Courts Wide Awake. The reason I love this album cover is because of the movement that is sort of portrayed in these three figures. Sort of Wiggles looking figures. Wiggles are from Australia, so they're in the front of my mind, the Wiggles, and this is just totally reminding me of them. And the Wiggles love to move, they love to dance. Literally have arms that are wiggling because of the beautiful, groovy, funky sounds on this album. It totally fits the intense, crazy ride that this album is, with songs that just make me want to move and dance so much. This album gets me pumped up. It's just like a fun time. So I just wanted to end this video on just a really fun album with a very fun album cover for good times, because we all need a bit of good times right now. I'm stuck in lockdown, okay? So yeah, that's it. That's my favorite albums part 2. Not that these are my second favorite albums compared to the first part, it's just a continuation of part 2. Those would probably be all my favorite album covers currently in my collection, so I'm gonna have to buy quite a few more albums to do a part 3 eventually. But I hope you've enjoyed part 1 and 2 for now. Tell me what you think of the album covers I showed today. Do you agree about Led Zeppelin 4 being one of the best album covers of all time? Do you like Nirvana's Nevermind? What is your favorite Radiohead album cover? You know, just let me know what you think of the things I mentioned today. And until next week, where I'm going to be talking a lot about Lord of the Rings, I'll see you soon. I hope you enjoyed the video. Bye!